Everybody's talking at me. I don't hear a word they're saying, only the echoes of my mind. Wah, 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 wah. Welcome to the Kongversation Mini! I'm Hyle Russell.
And you're joined today by me, Harry Nilsson. I'm sorry, Jeff Onan. I forgot my own name.
I was excited because I thought maybe the rules of death no longer applied, and Harry Nilsson came back to us after being dead for several decades.
Everyone is aware of a respawn timer. It exists. But
yeah.
Nope, I'm sorry, I'm not Harry Nilsson. I am Jeff Onan, and that's who I am.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Now, you wouldn't be here today if we didn't have a show, and we wouldn't have a show if we didn't have something to talk about. And we have something to talk about, and that is Tawks. Jeff, Tawks. So, bringing everybody up to speed, for those of you who aren't hip to the news, you know, we've been wondering, since they announced Tropical Freeze for the Switch earlier this year, who would be running Funky's Flying By in the new Funky mode in the game? Because the most common answer, the most common point we kept arriving at was, well, it probably won't be anybody because that would require time and effort. The simplest choice would be it's just going to be Funky manning his own shop, because it's not really going to matter if if you're playing as Funky and then you go to Funky's Flying By. We didn't really know how new Funky mode was going to work, if you're actually going to see Funky on the map screen or if that was just going to be something you could select from the levels. Well, now we know Funky's going to be running around on the map screen, and that kind of opened it up a little bit. And so some people were speculating, hey, it would be great if Retro could bring back Candy Kong, because Cranky Kong started as a shopkeeper in the Retro games, then he became playable. Funky then became a shopkeeper, he became playable. The last original Kong helper from the first Donkey Kong Country game to have not been brought in to a Retro game is Candy Kong. So Candy was a good choice, but that would still require a new model and a lot of work. So we didn't really speculate that. Now others like me, Jeff, really wanted Retro to respect continuity by making it Bazaar Bear. You know, since he is a shopkeep by trade, who is naturally friends with Funky Kong due to their proximity in the Northern Hemisphere. And they even became business partners in Donkey Kong Land 3 in the venture known as the Sheepy Shop. Everybody knows that, Jeff.
Well, approximately 1/13 of all answerers, when asked the question, which Brothers Bear is best, will give you the response, Bazaar Bear. So, a solid percentage of human beings believe Bazaar Bear to be the best of all the Brothers Bear.
Just a quick correction there, Jeff. I believe you mean 1/14, because we cannot forget about the great character known as Bachelor Bear, who was only in the Game Boy Advance version of Donkey Kong.
I didn't make a mistake. 1/13 of people like Bazaar Bear, and I'm aware there's 14 Brothers Bear, but at some point in the shuffle, there's some sort of difference in opinion that averages out to make what I originally said correct. Don't ask me what it is, but I would never be wrong about a thing. I promise.
This is why you are the math whiz of the staff, and I am just the lowly English major. I am the liberal arts fraud. So, Jeff, today, Game Explained. They're good people, Game Explained. They do a lot of good work. They do more good video game journalism than most of us. Definitely more than DKVI does. We don't do anything here. We're basically the clowns in the back of the classroom, not learning math, obviously. But the good people at Game Explained, they're at PAX East, and it sounds like some terrible disease that maybe got eradicated in the early 20th century thanks to vaccines. But now, thanks to vaccine truthers, PAX East is plaguing children worldwide once again. PAX East has Tropical Freeze for the Switch. on display. And so Game explains that, hey, nobody's solved this conundrum. Why don't we play new Funky mode? Why don't we go to Funky's Flying By and see what awaits us? So they opened up the Pandora's box, and what flew out but a parrot named Tawks. Now, we've had a request by staffer Joe Mudd to read Tawks' dialogue as Gilbert Godfrey. I'm not sure why, but Jeff, I'm going to extend this branch to you since he's a parrot. He's going to be on a lot of branches. Would you want to read the dialogue I provided to you, as said by Tawks, in the voice of Gilbert Godfrey?
I can do that, Hyle. I can do that for you. I just want everyone to know that before this moment, I was not prepared at all for what has been asked of me just now. So this is 100% improvised. That's not to say that I can't do it, but we'll give it a shot. Let's go. Are we ready to go?
I'm ready. I am sitting back. I am ceding the microphone to you. I want to see you fail spectacular. I mean, I want to see you soar to new heights.
You said you would feed me dialogue. Where is it at? I'm ready to go.
It's in the show notes, Jeff. The show notes I provided you.
When? Oh, okay.
The show notes you're in right now, because I can see you. I can see you.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. I think I'm there, I guess. So, Hyle, you're gonna have to direct me.
Okay, you see that image of Tawks with the dialogue, the word balloon, the only image in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Take a crack at that. Take a crack at that.
But do it in an impression of Gilbert Gottfried? Yeah,
yes.
Okay, I can do it.
All right.
The word balloon. Here we go. Okay, right. Hey, dude! Okay, I feel like maybe I should stop. I've got like 90% to go in terms of percentage.
Do you want me to give it a shot? Because I feel like since Chad left, none of us can really match his.
While you're out saving the island. No, that's enough. I think you need to give it a shot.
All right.
Do your best.
All right. I am no impressionist like Chad was, but I'll give it a shot.
Clearly,
All right.
you can't do worse than I just did.
All right. Hey, dude! No, I can't do it. Fuck it. All right, so we're not gonna do that. But
it's harder than it looks. I promise.
And the sad thing is, Gilbert Godfrey's voice isn't actually Gilbert Godfrey's real voice. That's all a put on he does. So.
Yeah, let's be real. That's 100% computers that do that, right?
It's just CGI. It's just CGI all the way down.
There's no such thing as a Gilbert Gottfried.
No, he is a hoax like Nessie. No, I was gonna say Sasquatch, but we all know Sasquatch definitely exists.
I mean, it's a hoax, but it's a real hoax.
No.
Nessie's one of those fake hoaxes.
I don't think there's any science. We were having this discussion earlier today while we were playing Sea of Thieves, Jeff. I don't think there's any science that backs up there not being a Sasquatch.
That's the thing about scientists, is that why would you be a scientist if it wasn't to be towards the cause of trying to prove whether or not there is such a thing as a Sasquatch? It's really the central focus of such a field as there is called science.
I completely agree, and it has no bearing that science was my second worst subject after math. So, Tawks, he says, hey, dude, while you're out saving the island, you can trust old Tawks to hold down the fort here. I'll even hook you up with a sweet employee discount. So, he's talking to Funky there, by the way. So, visually, Jeff, Tawks is very similar to Squawks. He's molded in the same shape as Squawks, but he's red instead of green. He has a grayish beak, and he has a plume of feathers atop his head on the old skull there. Ironically, he looks like that render of Squawks from Donkey Kong Country 2 that always made it appear like Squawks' left wing was actually a plume of feathers on his head, except now Tawks actually has that plume of feathers. So I don't know if that was intentional or inspired by, but that always threw me, that render, when I was a kid. So it's good to see a parrot finally make good on that promise.
Yeah, so the thing about the Mohawk is that Mohawks are cool. All people know this. And now we finally, after all these years, have a parrot. A parrot that has a Mohawk. And it's like, okay, so you have a parrot that does not have a Mohawk. You think, fine. Now we have a parrot that does have a Mohawk. And my opinion is greater than fine. A+. Awesome. I'm into it.
Yeah, here's a little Mohawk Donkey Kong trivia for you. I bet you didn't know this. The last game to incorporate characters wearing Mohawks, the last Donkey Kong game that is, was Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Actually, the new play control version of Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, but
2009.
That's semantics. Yeah, that's semantics.
It's been more than a few years. It's actually been several years.
Right. So this is groundbreaking stuff here. But besides the plume on his head, I feel like I should also really relay this, because this is an audio medium, so we have to describe everything in the visual form with words. And you know what they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, I say 1,000 words is the only way to do a podcast. So instead of wings with the coloring of red on the outside and yellow on the inner rim, like squawks, he's got blue feathers on the outside and then yellow on the inside, which is just brilliant, I would say, Jeff. I really don't know how Retro does it. This is really just, I think, revolutionary on the part of the little studio in Austin. He's also, of course, wearing a pair of funky sunglasses, which was the reason I initially actually hated Tawks. I want Tawks. Tawks. I initially hated Tawks for about literally 5 seconds, maybe less than 5 seconds, when I saw him this morning. Because I saw the sunglasses and I said, no, I don't like this. Because I took it to be another instance of a Professor Chops. A well-meaning but misguided attempt by Retro to create characters for Donkey Kong's world without really understanding what makes a truly successful Donkey Kong character. So this is going to be a little bit of a soapbox, and it really doesn't apply to the situation now, but I want you, Jeff, to understand my mindset coming at new characters in Retro's Donkey Kong games. So it all comes down to regular wildlife versus select anthropomorphic animals who are essentially proxies for humans. So, ignoring the broader Donkey Kong universe, which, incorporates genie magic and googly eyes to bring all sorts of animals up to that human level of intelligence, as seen in the Banjo series, the Conker series, Ukulele, etc., etc., Donkey Kong Country games traditionally, and I've got to stress traditionally, I realize it's not the case anymore, traditionally only have 3 clans with human-like characteristics: Kongs, Bears, and Kremlings. Donkey Kong 64 broke this unspoken rule by bringing in a flood of what we call Timbers Island refugees. All sorts of talking animals like hares and beetles and owls, and everybody suddenly could talk like a human, walk like an Egyptian. It was a clusterfuck. But whatever, I don't want to live in a world where Rodney the Hare doesn't exist, so I eventually made my peace with it. And like we said, we have explanations for all of this. Taj, the genie, and googly eyes, and what have you. There's all sorts of get-out-of-jail-free cards, all sorts of continuity, fanon justifications you can make in your diseased brain. It doesn't really matter. But the thing is, it doesn't really feel right in a Donkey Kong game when you come down to it. And Returns and Tropical Freeze kind of ignored this rule with the Snowmats, with the Oinks, the Professor Chops clan. And I would argue that's not really important at the end of the day. The Donkey Kong universe has, expanded for over 20 years now to include animals like this. But this rule is deadly important when it comes to one thing, and that's animal buddies. because the animal buddies, what makes them so appealing, what makes them fundamentally so cool and enticing for players, is that they are just regular wildlife. The animal buddies are essentially the Kong equivalent to pets. Instead of a dog, though, they've got a rhino that they ride around on. And to me, that's a lot less appealing if whoever is making Donkey Kong games forgets that Rambi is just supposed to be a regular rhinoceros who kind of acts like a dog. And if they reinterpreted Rambi as a Rhodes Scholar who has a finely tuned palate for wine, that is something that hasn't happened, thankfully, but would break the concept of animal buddies. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, good. So Donkey Kong 64, though, introduced something else. And that is what makes Tawks actually so brilliant. So Donkey Kong 64 was the game that established that squawks, as well as the other parrots of Donkey Kong Island, can mimic speech at a very cartoonishly proficient level. This allows them to hold, or nearly hold, conversations with characters and even act as guides, as Squawks did in that game. Now, the retro games do sort of confirm this, and they confirm this interpretation of things, because Squawks can say things like, puzzle! But, in a decidedly parrot-esque voice, as I just demonstrated much more competently than my Gilbert Gottfried. So that would confirm to me that Squawks is not on the same intellect level as your Kazooies, for example, your Red-Crested Breagles in the Banjo games. But he's still very much a parrot of a parrot-level intelligence. He can just, if you squint hard enough, be trained to have very, very thorough lines of dialogue and almost hold conversations with the Kongs. And that's what we've got here with Tawks. Tawks, Tawks. Jeff, what are your...
Though, real quick, what's interesting is that Tawks, it rhymes with squawks. It's spelled like squawks. But if you actually kind of look at it, it's a little bit like a different word, which is called Tawks. Talks. Which is like to talk, which is what you do when you speak a language from your mouth.
Do you think this is what Retro could have been working on for the last 4 years?
I kind of imagined that. So the fact that it's based on the English word talks, to talk, to use language with verbally through your mouth, which expends sounds, but it rhymes with squawks, is a parrot, which is, his name is based on the squawk, which is an onomatopoeia for the sound that a parrot makes. I don't know if I could come up with the same sort of naming convention in under 4 years. It would take me at least several years to come up with that level of name depth and involvement in the level of the name and the depth of the pun that is the name Tawks. 4 years, I think, is fair. It's definitely understandable. I think it's a fair level of how long it would take a studio to size. Because let's remember, Retro's not a large studio.
No,
it's a medium to mid to medium sized studio. I think so. This is what they've been working on. I, for one, am excited.
I think even all the people who were upset that Retro wasn't working on a new Metroid Prime game back in 2013, 2014, they saw this news today and they were like, oh, our bad. We understand completely. You've bested us because this requires all of their manpower, all of their effort coming up. Seriously, though, I do love this character. I know we're being snarky assholes. This Tawks is great. This is, I think, and I said this on the forum today, and I kind of stand by it. I think this is Retro's greatest contribution to Donkey Kong canon since they took the reins back in 2010. I think this is terrific. I love Tawks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, what has Retro really contributed to the canon of the franchise, in terms of just a character? I mean, when you look at Tawks, you can imagine this character continuing to appear in all future entries of the franchise. Anytime Funky Kong shows up, you can imagine, yeah, Tawks will be there, like on his shoulder. You know, just it's Funky and Tawks. This is Funky's right-hand man. And it's not a regular occurrence to have them just contribute a new piece of continuity, a new piece of the franchise that says, yeah, this is just a new piece of the character that is Funky Kong. Funky Kong has a parrot that is his little sidekick. And I mean, that's Funky Kong has been around as a character for over 20 years. And here we are. Yeah, Funky Kong has a parrot. Why not? This is his sidekick. And it can imitate who Funky Kong, and presumably he'll show up from now on alongside Funky Kong. Retro hasn't really contributed a lot to the franchise in the way of those little things that are like, yeah, this is now just part of the franchise. This is a thing that is now going to happen. And I feel like Tawks is one of those things. Funky and Tawks. It's his sidekick. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, everything Retro's contributed, and they've contributed obviously quite a bit, but things like the Tiki Tak tribe, which may add some lore to the backstory of Donkey Kong Island, or the Snowmads, which expand the world but still really feel like temporary replacements for the Kremlings, whereas Tawks is just kind of this great new character who can appear in future games, or that will want to appear in future games. And that's really, I think, something that's been missing up until this point, where they haven't really stumbled upon that like winning formula that makes all of the characters from the Rare era so beloved, you know? Because there's Professor Chops, but he's still very decidedly controversial, just in that I think Tropical Freeze went a long way towards rehabilitating his image, but he's still very much the Jar Jar Binks of the Donkey Kong Country series, and I don't think the fans have ever really warmed up to him. Everywhere I'm seeing today, people are loving Tawks, and to have that almost near unanimous universal acclaim, it's hard to do with this fan base. And it's great to see. If this is Retro's final dance with Donkey Kong, I don't know what the future holds, who's taking the reins of the franchise next. But if this is it for Retro, at least they're going out and giving us this great gift. So
absolutely.
Now, Jeff. Now this does beg the question, because I took to social media today and I screamed, "New Animal Buddy! New Animal Buddy!" And some people said, no, what? Wrong way.
Wrong way.
They said, he's not an animal, buddy. What are you talking about? So I realized we need to have this discussion. What defines an animal buddy? So obviously, from a gameplay perspective, animal buddies are animals who help Kongs during gameplay. Donkey Kong Country, the game that introduced them, gave you 4 you could ride on, and 1 who followed you around with a flashlight. Ironically enough, Squawks. Not really ironic, just ironic that he was the one I singled out. I didn't mean to do that, but there we go. So Donkey Kong Country 2 broadened that scope by letting you ride on Squawks, or letting him carry you, and his relatives Squawks and Squawk, of course. But they also introduced another flashlight character in Glimmer, as well as a new animal buddy that did nothing but alter 2 of the stages he was in, and that was, of course, Clapper. So kind of broadened the definition of what an animal buddy could do. Donkey Kong Country 3, of course, gave us Perry the Parallel Bird, who did nothing but fly directly overhead, allowing the Kongs to reach certain unreachable items, and then giving them a sweet-ass prize for getting Perry all the way to the no animal sign. Perry was kind of this animal that had no offensive capability. You had to protect Perry, but he was still an animal buddy. And of course, Donkey Kong 64 gave us Glower the Tadpole, another flashlight carrier. Of course, Glower, we could do a whole other conversation mini on what we found out recently about Glower, in that he was originally going to be Glimmer in Donkey Kong 64, but I feel like we should table that for another discussion entirely. So, okay. From there, things get murkier. Donkey Kong Country Returns, Retro's first Donkey Kong Country game, introduced a bunch of new animal characters, like Canopy the Giraffe and Zigman the Zebra. But they didn't really do anything. They were just background characters, a little bit of texture. And we've talked about this quite a bit. We always felt like those should have been pre-existing animal characters like Espresso, Radley, Squitter. But they were just there. And still, though, Returns did establish them in the instruction manual as animal friends of the Kongs. So from a gameplay perspective, they weren't really animal buddies. But from an in-universe perspective, I would argue, yeah, they were animal buddies. I mean, they were animal friends of the Kongs, and who knows what adventures the Kongs actually went on with them when we weren't privy to the events. So, I would argue like Canopy, Zygmunt, Cyril the Squirrel, all that wacky bunch, they are animal buddies, at least from an in-universe perspective. I will fully cop to the fact that they don't influence gameplay in any way. The only animal buddy you could really make that case for in Donkey Kong Country Returns is Krill the Whale. So, yeah. Because Krill the Whale you actually ride on one stage. You definitely can make the case that's an animal buddy from a gameplay perspective as well as from an in-universe perspective. But what about Tawks? Now, Tawks, he's manning the shop. Funky is putting him in the shop to basically mimic Funky when Funky is not there. So, Tawks is still basically selling you stuff, and in that case, it's not an animal buddy we've ever really seen before, but he's still influencing the game, still influencing what happens in the game in a direct sense. And he's also an animal friend of Funky that Funky trained, so I would argue, yeah, Tawks is definitely an animal buddy under both criteria. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the thing about Tawks is, from a gameplay perspective, when you look at it from the perspective of, say, an example, Donkey Kong. When you play as Donkey Kong, just an example, Tawks is absolutely not an animal buddy, because the only animal buddies that there are the ones that help Donkey Kong on his journey. Now, Tawks is not one of Donkey Kong's animal buddies, but Tawks is one of Funky Kong's animal buddies. Tawks is a friend of Funky Kong's, and for the character in an in-universe perspective, Funky Kong, for Funky Kong's in-universe perspective, Tawks does help him out in a gameplay manner, in that Funky Kong can go on an adventure without having to man the shop. So the fact that Tawks mans the shop for him is a real gameplay benefit to Funky Kong. He doesn't have to sit there and man the shop. So yes, the Tawks is an animal buddy. The question that what we need to ask is Tawks one of Donkey Kong's animal buddies? No, he's not. Tawks is one of Funky Kong's animal buddies. And what is an animal buddy? Animal buddies as a concept is not a general thing. It's a particular thing to each individual of the Kong family. Individuals within the Kong family can and do raise and train their own friends that are animal individuals, and then after raising and training them, utilize them for utility and also for friendship. And it just so happens that Tawks is one of those animals which was raised and utilized specifically by Funky Kong. So I kind of imagine the concept of animal buddies as being something much greater than what we've ever seen it to be within the games themselves. Every Kong has animals that they raise and nurture and befriend to help them out in their life. And that includes Candy Kong, that includes Wrinkly Kong, that includes Cranky Kong, Swanky Kong, Funky Kong. Every Kong, during the course of their lifetime, is going to raise some wild animal to help them out in their day-to-day lives. Whether it be for a utility purpose or just for a friendship purpose.
Now, I have to wonder, what was Wrinkly Kong's animal buddy? Was it a poison tree frog that she raised to euthanize her? These are the questions I want to answer, Jeff.
Funny one, Hyle. But let's be real. What killed Wrinkly Kong was very treatable clinical depression. And it's not a joke.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so glib. I shouldn't. I really, I should be shamed. I should be shamed off the internet. I apologize.
Shame upon you. Shames. Several shames.
Now, I wouldn't get necessarily so specific like you're getting. Now, sure, Tawks is definitely Funky's own personal animal buddy. I would still argue, though, that due to Funky's prominence and place within the Kong clan, he would definitely allow Tawks to serve the other Kongs should the situation ever arise. Therefore, I'm willing to be generous and say Tawks is an animal buddy of the Kongs. Now, some Kongs have greater relationships with some of these animal buddies than other Kongs. For example, I very much doubt Donkey really has much of a relationship with Radley or Squitter. Those are really, Diddy and Dixie's close animal friends. Whereas Cranky has a great affinity for Espresso and Winky. So, it varies from Kong to Kong what relationship they have with a particular animal, but we still say they're animal buddies of the Kongs, each and every one of them. So, now we finally have Funky having a direct relationship with an animal buddy, and it's magnificent. I want to take it to the live stream chat real quick, because we are live streaming this mini, and I want to see what some people have to say about Tawks, what they're talking about Tawks. And we got I Am Gibbon holding down the fort, and I Am Gibbon says that about Tawks, that he's so 90s, it's amazing. And yeah, I'll get to that in a second, I Am Gibbon. I want to talk about how Funky has trained Tawks. He also says even K. Rool has an animal buddy, and that is true. K. Rool has an animal buddy, another parrot, Screech. And I love the lore that's building up around the parrots of the Kongs and the Kremlings. If you'll notice, all of the Kong parrots have a certain naming scheme. We've got Squawks, Quawks, Squawk, which is our fanon name for the second purple parrot, and then, of course, now we've got Tawks. So, very much all of a similar naming scheme. So it makes me wonder if we see more Kremling parrots in the future, if they're all going to end in each, in an each sound, or a reach sound.
Like Screech, you might have a future animal named Bleach.
Yes, or Beach, because that's where you'll find some parrots in the tropics. Or they don't even have to go for a naming or a rhyming naming convention. They could just go from Screech to AC Slater to Mr. Belding to Miss Bliss. There are so many Saved by the characters from the original, from Good Morning Miss Bliss, from the new class and the college years, as well as the movie where they got married, Zach and Kelly, that you could just have an endless supply of Kremling parrots in the future. I'm really excited about the prospects here, Jeff. I really feel like this is the best time to be a Donkey Kong fan.
Now, what really fascinates me as a fan is the idea. So Funky now has his own personal, not just an animal buddy, but specifically a parrot animal buddy. And of course, we've had Squawks before, but we also know of Screech, as you previously mentioned. Screech is K. Rool's personal buddy, and it makes me think of the region or the area that the Kongs live in. That the people, or the Kongs who live there, the Kremlings who live there, anyone who lives there, that the idea of raising your own parrot friend that's gonna be your guy is a common thing. K. Rool has a parrot, Donkey has a parrot, Funky has a parrot, and in Donkey Kong 64 you see not just Squawks, but you see several parrots flying in the opening cutscene. I want to say 5. This is just off the top of my head, but I want to say there's several parrots, maybe 5, flying around, and that maybe, just maybe, each of those parrots is the personal helper, the personal friend of each of the 5 Kongs, which are playable in that game, and maybe Squawks, who shows up in the first Donkey Kong Country game, is a friend of Donkey Kong's, and maybe Quawks, who debuts in the second Donkey Kong Country game, is a friend of Diddy Kong's, and maybe Squawk, who gameplay-wise behaves a little differently in the third Donkey Kong Country game, maybe that is Dixie Kong's personal parrot friend, and maybe having a personal parrot friend, a PPF, if you will, is something that all sentient beings in the region, all Kongs, all Kremlings, maybe it's a common thing.
You know what? I'm getting excited about the prospects here, Jeff, and I want to see a Donkey Kong game where you just raise a parrot from beginning, like it's like a Tamagotchi, but for a parrot, where you pick a Kong and you have to go out in the wild and you have to find a parrot and you have to capture it and you have to train it to mimic your behaviors. And that's what Funky Kong has done here, Jeff. Funky has taken this blank slate that the nature provided it, and it said, you know what? I want to make it a radical 90s dude in my image. So it's going to learn from my speech patterns and mimic me, and I can even go one step further, and I can train this bird to have some like radical body gestures. You know, I can make this the son I can never have with Candy Kong, because that is the only woman I would ever have a family with. But unfortunately, society frowns upon it because she's with Donkey Kong, and I can never break that relationship up. So you know what? I've got to pass on my heritage to this bird instead, and I'm fine with that because I am a chill dude. I'm Funky Kong. I just lit up, and I'm blazed out of my mind, and it's all cool and it's all okay.
Well, let me ask you this, Hyle. Let me ask you this. What do you think of Tawks from this point of view? Is Tawks as a character? Is Tawks the type of character? Is he the type of parrot? Is he specifically Funky Kong's best pal who can do a pretty good impression of Funky Kong? Or alternatively, is Tawks the type of parrot who just his entire character perspective / identity is that he can impersonate any character, and then it just happens that in this game he decides that he's gonna be Funky Kong, but in a general sense, that's not who he is. The character of Tawks can be anything he wants to be. That this is just one impression on his range of impressions. Could he fill in the role of Cranky Kong at the Kong College and dispense wisdom?
What? Kong College?
I'm sorry, not Kong College. Cranky's cabin, Cranky's hut, whatever you want to say. Yeah. My point is, could he impersonate other Kongs besides Funky Kong, or is he specifically a Funky Kong raised, Funky Kong sort of substitute?
The latter, and I'll give you 2 reasons, okay? And these will be the reasons we'll end this episode on. Reason the 1. It's much better for the Donkey Kong series, and much better for weird fanboys and fangirls like us who want as many characters as possible for there to eventually be a parrot for every Kong. So this can be Funky's parrot, and we can celebrate him. Tawks, here's to you, buddy. And then in the future we can hope for Swanky to have a parrot who has a golden beak and, you know, is decked out in polyester on his wings and I don't know, goes on panty raids, whatever Swanky's parrot would do. That's what I want to see, Nintendo, and I know you're listening. Nintendo. Reason the 2. Funky Kong is such a complex character that Tawks would only have time to mimic him, because Funky can be a surfer dude, Funky can be a greasy mechanic, Funky is an entrepreneur, and Funky is a gun nut. Now, will this eventually end in heartbreak? Will this eventually end with Funky forgetting to lock up his weapons and Tawks learning how to shoot them, and Funky walking in to Funky's armory one sunny day and Tawks shooting him dead and Funky being just another gun death statistic? Yes, that's where this is headed.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.